Hey guys, today I just wanted to quickly talk to you about a type of English question that has undergone some changes between the normal or old or previous ACT, whatever you want to call it, the one that's being phased out permanently in September of 2025, and the new or enhanced or shorter ACT that's becoming permanent in September of 2025. Although if you're taking it in the summer, you can opt into this test online for the June or July tests. Okay, and this kind of an English question is called a transition. A transition kind of question, you see kind of a definition right there, but it's a word or a phrase that transitions two sentences properly. So from a previous sentence to a following sentence. So it's all based on the relationship between these two sentences, okay? So for example, I have these two sentences right here. It says the pirate was going to sail the seven seas. Because of this, he went to the mall. Now, the phrase because of this as a transition implies cause and effect, right? So the pirate was going to sail the seven seas. That caused him to go to the mall. But that doesn't really make any sense. Instead, what we need there is a transition, a word or a phrase that implies that this pirate changed his mind, huh? So the pirate was going to sail the seven seas. Well, we don't want to say because of this. We need to say something else, which is going to be what you see right down here. Instead, he went to the mall. Okay. Now, it used to be on old ACTs or the ACT that's being phased out that this question was less important than it is now, which is why I'm making this video. So what I want to do is go back and show you how this question used to be asked and how often, and then show you how often and how this question is being asked on the new or enhanced ACT. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the old ACT, if you will, and the transition question is this one right here. It's number 8. So this whole passage is about the invention of the barcode scanner, okay? So the previous sentence says, although successful, the concoction, although this is supposed to be contraption, letter B right there, so I'll say contraption. So although successful, the contraption was both large and costly. This contraption is the original ever barcode scanner prototype, okay? So this contraption was both large and costly. For example, progress stalled until the 1970s when laser technology became available. So obviously, as you can tell, this is a transition question. The way that this is written, though, with this phrase, for example, being in there or the F no change option, doesn't really make any sense if you think about it. So it says, although successful, the contraption was both large and costly. For example, if that transition was going to be right, it would say something like, for example, it was so big it couldn't even fit on a shelf, or it was so costly that the researchers ran out of money. You see, but it doesn't say that. Instead, we get more like a cause and effect situation. Although successful, the contraption was both large and costly. Maybe cause and effect. Progress stalled until the 1970s when laser technology became available. Well, out of these 4 options over here, only one of them implies cause and effect, and that's G, as a result. Okay? So the way this question used to be asked is just like this. It would just be, the first word or 2 or 3 or however many of a sentence would be underlined like you see right there. And there would be no, indication that this is a transition question except for the beginning of a sentence being underlined. But that's changed, and I want to show you how. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the edits that I'm making in my book because I have to make all these edits to keep up with all the changes that the ACT is doing. But the transition question is this one right here, which is number 38. So this passage as a whole is about this man whose uncle is teaching him how to fly a stunt kite, okay? So the previous question, or the previous sentence says, but that was not all, for he could also do flips, dives, stalls, and other tricks. And then it says, on the other hand, the kite started to dive towards the ground. Okay, before we get into what the right answer is, let me tell you about the 2 big changes that the new ACT is making in regards to this question. The first one is that they're way more frequent. So on the old or previous ACT, you would expect 2 or 3 of these out of 75, which comes to about 3% of the total test was about transition questions, okay? But on the new ACT, this is one major thing that stuck out to me, is that these questions are more than double frequent. They're more than doubly frequent, if you will. So now on the new ACT, on the one practice test that's been given out by the ACT itself, there's 4 of them out of 50, which accounts for 8% of the entire test. Okay, so that's very significant. It's so significant that I had to move these kinds of questions, these transition questions, from a later step to the second step. And if you know anything about the way that I do ACT prep, I do it from most to least important. So step 2 would be extremely important. Okay, nevertheless, that's one difference. The second difference is that now on the new ACT, they're including this question at the beginning, which is called a question stem. It says, which transition word or phrase is the most logical in context? And this kind of question stem is in front of every single one of the transition questions on the new ACT. It just makes it a little bit easier because the student, you can see, or no, like if this first part is underlined, say for example, you don't have to guess, is this a question about commas? Is this a question about modifying clauses? Instead, you know exactly what this question is asking, which introductory word or phrase is going to be the one that transitions these two sentences the best, okay? So what's happening here in these two sentences is that you have this uncle and he's doing all these tricks with this kite, and then all of a sudden the kite starts to dive towards the ground. So we need an adverb or a phrase that's going to work best to introduce this kind of transition where everything's calm, and then all of a sudden this kite is starting to dive towards the ground, okay? So H doesn't really work, even though I saw it coming, because he doesn't see it coming, right? So it's not H. Oops, the eraser was on, but it's not H. G says quietly. That doesn't really make sense in context. It's not quietly either. The way that it's written, F, no change, says on the other hand. That implies contrast, but that's not what the sentence needs. So it's not F either. And that's why the answer is J. Suddenly, there's this major change where it seems like the uncle has control, but now it's diving towards the ground. Okay, so hopefully this is going to help you if you're preparing for this enhanced or new ACT debuting, well, not debuting, but becoming permanent in September of 2025. If you ever have any questions about this stuff, then don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thanks for watching, and God bless.